The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalies podcast, live from the unnamed Bar and Grill studios. Back using our retrograde equipment once again. My name is Giles Farrell. Across the table for me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
And Ben, I have a Grind My Gears to lead off our show this week.
You know what really grinds my gears?
Is it audio equipment related? No, but
I have several Grind My Gears to lead off the show this week. So Saturday night, I covered the Iowa Wild game.
Yeah.
And in the press box, I was sitting in the back row of the box. And so, of course, over my shoulder was the TV and the radio people. So I was fortunate enough to have the Iowa Wild TV crew that was weirdly on TV Saturday night.
Like locally they had it on TV?
Well, it was on TV for some special reason because they had a guest color commentator join Joe O'Donnell in the booth. And it was Mr. Pat Micheletti. So anyway, I was fortunate enough to have Joe O'Donnell right over my shoulder calling the hockey game.
Sure.
And sitting there during the hockey game, I thought, gee, the Wild have a perfectly good play-by-play guy sitting in the minor leagues. And if we could just flash you back to, what was that, last week? Or was it a week before? When we were talking about the Wild broadcast team needing to be better. The Minnesota Wild broadcast team. There's a good, serviceable replacement just sitting in the minor leagues, but we are obviously going to be graced with Tony Pants for the foreseeable future.
See, I don't think that FSN is willing to cut bait on that yet.
He's their guy.
Yeah, exactly.
They're loyal to him like Chuck Fletcher is loyal to first-round picks. Wait,
well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
They're wrong. They're loyal to him like Chuck Fletcher is loyal to the first-round picks that he's actually used.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's more fair. I just don't think that they're going to cut bait on LePant anytime soon. I think they've hitched their wagon to him, and despite everyone else in the country kind of despising his play call, I don't think they're going to get rid of it. And there's plenty of rubes out there that love it because he's homerish like them, and they don't, for lack of a better term, they don't know any better.
They don't want to hear what's wrong.
Right.
Well, that's FSN in a nutshell. They don't tell you what's wrong.
No kidding.
I think I've said on this show before, Wes Walz is great at his commentary because he's pretty straight, but then like 5 games after that, he's pretty censored, so somebody probably has to have a chat with him. But anyway.
They're a team partner, Giles. They're not objective journalists. They're a team partner. Heaven forbid.
Yeah. Well, anyway, enough about that. I don't know. It was just fortunate to kind of listen to Joe's call of the game as it's happening right in front of you, and I enjoyed it. So that's what's grinding my gears this week. Update to the Grind Your Gears from last month. You can find the Hagee's Breakfast Pizza in Iowa stores.
Hy-Vee stores, right?
Yeah. As my girlfriend pointed out this past weekend.
I'm gonna have to look. There's a Hy-Vee by me in Savage. I'm gonna have to check that out and see if I can snag a Haggie's breakfast pizza since I'm in town for the next 2 weeks here.
All right. Minnesota Wild week in review.
Sure.
It opened last Monday in Boston at the Boston Garden. Did I get that right? Okay. And a absolutely abysmal performance from the Minnesota Wild, in which I had to try and recap on our Facebook Live show. And as I noted here in my podcast notes, I summarized this game with woof.
This one I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, which, as you might imagine, doesn't show a whole lot of Boston Bruin games or Minnesota Wild games, and was a little busy, so I couldn't watch it via streaming. But looked at I didn't get to rewatch it yet, but that looked like maybe the worst second period in Minnesota Wild history. I think. I mean, there's probably been worse, but maybe the worst period of hockey they've played this season. I would assume
they had like 4 shots on goal.
Yeah, it was like 14-5 shots on goal, something like that. And the Bruins scored twice, took it from 2-1 to 4-1.
And this was a Boston team that was pretty injury ravaged,
right?
So you can't have efforts like that. And as Boudreau said after the game, that not good, and he so aptly punished them the next day at practice in what appeared to be just a good old-fashioned bag skate. But no, the Wild lose 5-3 in Boston, and the score just makes it completely closer than what it actually was.
Sure.
Nito Niederreiter and Mikhail Granlund were the goal scorers, but the Bruins had 4 goals sandwiched in between those goals, and
right,
as I told my girlfriend when Eric Stahl made it 4-2 with about 5 minutes left in the third, when she said, "Oh, they still have a chance," I said, "No." I'm sorry, 4-3.
Yeah,
they still have a chance. I said, "No, I've seen this story before. They're just giving you false hope." And an empty net goal made it 5-3. So yeah, Tuesday the Wild had a pretty heavy skate as they were about to do back-to-back games in Toronto and Montreal, and the next day in Toronto on Wednesday was less than ideal as well, as the Wild completely dominated the play, outshooting the Toronto Maple Leafs 37-19, and the shot attempts were just completely off the chart in general. But just about any mistake the Wild made, the Maple Leafs made them pay, and this was an Austin Matthews-less Maple Leafs team, as he missed his first career game in the NHL. And the Wild lose 4-2 to Toronto to bring their losing streak up to 3, and 4 out of the last 5 games they just straight up lost, no overtime losses.
Yeah, and I did catch this one. As you said, the score didn't tell the story exactly, and it was ended up 3-1, right? That game
4-2. There were some another fluky goal on Devin Dubnyk, as he seemingly has been good for.
The story was kind of the 2 fluky goals on Dubnyk, where one goes off the end boards and then off his skate and in as he slides across the crease, and the other one literally perfectly goes off of Gustav Olsson's stick blade in the crease as well. So, a lot of folks wanted to jump down Doobie's throat after a rough performance Monday, and then those fluky goals on Wednesday. Me being the goalie apologist that I was, didn't see it that way, didn't go that route, but the effort was there at least, and so you really couldn't be upset with the effort, except for the fact that they didn't finish against Frederik Andersen, who is scuffling. I mean, Frederik Andersen, as bad as people think Dubnyk has been, Andersen's been worse. So it was disheartening to see them not be able to finish on a goalie that's not at the top of his game right now, like Andersen.
What I had noted here was this game just really reminded me of the playoffs last April against St. Louis, where the Wild just, outshooting the Maple Leafs by almost a 2-1 ratio, and, it just very, ridiculous kind of goals go against them, and
yep.
a lot of doom and gloom after this game against Toronto, and I kind of joined in. The next morning, I kind of wrote more of a column piece. I know that's your area of expertise.
Don't you hate pants?
On zone coverage about how the Wild have done themselves no favors.
Yeah.
Because really, starting with the game against Montreal on Thursday, they were opening up a 3-game stretch against, below average teams. And then really they're hitting a period of play where they're going to have 7 of 8 games, I believe, to close out the month against teams currently sitting in the playoff picture. So you're going to get very difficult opponents. And basically it was a do or die. Because once you get to the end of November and you're still playing like this, you're not coming out of that with a favorable record. And as we all know, teams who aren't in the playoff picture on December 1st typically don't get back in.
Yeah, it's tough to pull off. We can get into that later where they kind of sit right now, but they're really maybe not surviving this injury-plagued stretch as well as you'd hope. We talked about them being able to afford losses to a couple forwards, and that's what they have right now. But they can't have games where they completely get dominated by the Bruins. They can't have games where they let one slip against the Maple Leafs. I mean, even Saturday night against the Blackhawks, we talked about that last week, but they lose 1-0, and I mean, Corey Crawford kind of stands on his head, but that's a game that you should probably get a point out of as well. You got to find a way to get a goal in, otherwise you're really just making things harder on yourself down the line.
Before I forget, I was thinking about this. I was listening to a different hockey podcast on my way here, but the Blackhawks are not doing good.
No.
And it kind of popped in my head that, a head coach hasn't been fired in the NHL yet this year.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm starting to go I wonder how much longer Joe Quenneville's going to hang around, because him and Stan Bowman aren't exactly on good terms.
Well, and they had the early exit last year. It's kind of like a Boudreau thing where, they might have enough as far as they expect a certain amount of playoff success and haven't gotten it, and now the team is off to a abysmal start. But similar to Boudreau, I think Quenneville gets fired. I think he's probably hired by the next team that fires its coach.
Yeah.
So
it'll literally be the Bruce Boudreau.
It'll be literally the Boudreau.
He's unemployed for 4 days.
Yeah, he's got a very short vacation.
So no, anyway, the Wild come back Thursday night in Montreal. No, we are not speaking in French for those of you expecting it for this.
Sacre bleu!
Well, Claude Julien had some very unkind French words at the end of this game.
Yeah.
As I made a very classy gif of him. But no, the Wild bounce back. A very strong performance from Devin Dubnyk, a 41-save shutout. And Jason Zucker scores a natural hat trick in the third period to give the Wild a 3-0 win to get them off of the losing streak that they were on and give them a little bit of confidence heading into Saturday's game against Philadelphia.
Yeah, it was. I mean, certainly wasn't a game that you hang your hat on in the first 2 periods, I think. But they really, and actually on that note, the Lindgren kid from St. Cloud, from Lakeville, props to him. He was the reason why Montreal was in that game as long as they were. But really, Jason Zucker, we'll talk about him, I'm sure, but holy balls, did he have himself a week. And that game was, I don't know if I'm going to call it a coming out party, but that was certainly a game out of him that you'll remember. Anytime somebody gets a natural hat trick, it's a pretty rare feat. Only Marian Gabourik's the only other member of the Wild that's done it. So,
yeah. So with the 3 goals on Thursday night against Montreal, he also had the Wild's 2 goals in Toronto against the Maple Leafs. So that is 5 consecutive goals Jason Zucker has scored for the Minnesota Wild. So you give the Wild a day off in Philly, the city of brotherly love. Which, I don't know why that still
exists.
It's
one of those ironic nicknames, like calling a fat guy tiny. Right?
Don't get smart, Tiny. No, and the Wild come out Saturday night in Philadelphia, and Again, it was a Jason Zucker, Devin Dubnyk show, a 32-save shutout for Devin Dubnyk, and Jason Zucker nets the only goal for the Wild in their 1-0 win to give them now a 2-game winning streak heading into the week and giving them a little bit of hope for what's to come next. But I will throw it to you on your thoughts on this game.
I only caught the last half of this game, but it seemed like it was a pretty tight game overall. The Flyers are actually playing well right now. Steve Mason's playing well, and so that was going to be a hard-fought game as it is, but those are the games where, like I said with the Chicago game last weekend and the Boston game, you have to find a way to win those tight games. I mean, you can't just count on games where you kind of blow the team out a little bit like that Montreal, like both Montreal wins, I should say. You have to find a way to win those tight games. And to their credit, they won a 1-goal game. It's something where, they didn't let up right after the goal was scored and allow a goal against right away. They didn't let Philadelphia back into that game and be relegated to the loser point yet again. So it's positive. I still think this team has a little ways to go yet. If you look in the standings, they obviously have a little ways to go. But I think the most positive thing, and Jason Zucker certainly should be commended for what he's doing, but you and I, it's a common theme. This team will obviously go as its goaltending goes, and that's every hockey team. And we've been waiting for Devin Dubnyk to heat up this year. He's been inconsistent like he is. I wrote about that for Zone Coverage on Friday. Devin Dubnyk's inconsistent. That's just the kind of goalie that he is. But, with that inconsistency, he got off to a slow start, so you're expecting him to correct a little bit. You're expecting him to, that save percentage was just over 900. You're expecting him at a 915 to 920 level. So naturally, to even that out, he's going to have to play at a 940 level a little while for that to even out. Well, here we see him, working towards that with 2 very good games, and obviously 30 and 40 save shutouts. And I actually thought he did play pretty well against Toronto, fluky goals aside. There weren't anything he could really do about them so much. But we may be seeing him heat up for the month of November and into December, and that could go a long ways towards carrying this team while they're still missing Zach Parise and Charlie Coyle.
After Saturday night's game, Nino Niederreiter jokingly said, "I'm glad we have one guy scoring goals." Which, I'm sure it was said, with just, as in snark. But you think, like, the Wild are just not getting goals from other players they need to be getting goals from. And fortunately, Jason Zucker has kind of bailed them out this week.
Yeah.
And what happens when, the goals kind of stop?
When Zucker dries up?
When the Wild return home, because he's been polar opposite at home as compared to on the road this year, as he's been seemingly kicked out of his own home.
Which was a great bit.
I do enjoy
Thursday, Friday, into Saturday with Carly Applin being very active on Twitter, talking about the various jokes about Zucker getting sleep. I think, I'm not as worried about that. I think there's people who are playing well enough. Nino, especially, is playing well enough right now to where I think he can find the score sheet a little bit. He hasn't, with the exception of the 1 goal on Monday, but I think that, if this team needs another hero, there's one of them. I think Dumba's offense has upticked since the turnover, as it may be known. And obviously Eric Stahl is actually kind of a reliable workhorse that should find the stat sheet. I think Granlund is a concern. I know he scored on Monday as well, but I think him and Koivu not having good. Zucker is a concern, and getting some stability to those forward lines, I think, is a concern. A concern that you're going to have when you're missing 2 of your top wings. So, I don't know.
And I think on the other side of that, the Wild have been very sharp defensively, or at least, very much more structured. And, obviously you're going to have defensive miscues from time to time, but the Wild have done a really good job of fixing up the back end from where it was when the season started. And, that's kind of one of my bigger takeaways from this week is, Devin Dubnyk, made some great saves, but when the defense is very structured in front of him, he's going to do, a fairly good job regardless of what kind of streak he's on. And, as you kind of pointed out, he's kind of streaky. Well, probably some of that has more to do with the Wild defense and being not as structured, but it's another topic for another day. But before we preview the week ahead, I want a quick promo by saying that we are now on YouTube. Find our stuff there, all of our stuff except for a few shows which I have to try and figure out how to get off the copyright blocked list. But search Giles and the Goalie on YouTube. You can find us there. And also, if you were looking for a mailbag this week, we are not doing one because we are still waiting for our 30th iTunes review. So until we get that, we're holding out on a mailbag.
I love that we have a protest going here. Like, I know it was kind of on a whim.
People want a mailbag for our food questions.
Right.
We get, it's probably a good 50-50 split of hockey questions and then food questions.
Sure.
So people really love those food questions just to see if something will stick, but I'm holding out on the mailbag until, if anything, Serious Mashup's just going to create a new fake iTunes account and give us a rating just so he can spam the mailbag.
He is a team player like that. And we have Thanksgiving coming up, too. I mean,
there's a lot of
before next week's show
stuff coming up.
That's it's a scary thought.
All right, so week ahead, the Wild finish a home-and-home series with the Flyers on Tuesday at XL Energy Center as they open up a brief two-game homestand. This is, as I mentioned in that column on Thursday, this is kind of a game the Wild need to win again just before they open up a stretch. I think it was like 7 of 8 where they're playing against teams who are currently in the playoff picture. The only exception was the Avalanche, who have fallen out.
What?
And, weird how that happens after you trade your best player. But, and I should point out, entering the week, Minnesota Wild, 7-7-2, 16 points. They are still last in the Central Division, but they only trail Colorado by 1 point right now. And the Chicago Blackhawks, they only trail by 2. Dallas, 2. The Wild aren't very far behind from getting back into the playoff picture. They just have to start stringing together a better product.
Yeah. No, I think they've caught up in games played. They're 2 points, like as you mentioned, behind the Blackhawks. They're only 5 points out of second place in this division. And I know that sounds like a lot, but that's really not that bad. Especially when we're still in November. Mid-November at that. So I'm not worried about it. I mean, obviously the Blues are storming out to a start, but don't worry, they'll crater in January like every other Mike Yeo team. So the swoon will hit them hard, so don't worry about them. But, if you want this team to secure a playoff spot, you want them in that second or third spot in the Central. They're 5 or 6, 4 or 5 points behind that spot. And I think that's fine, considering where they're at, considering the injuries they've dealt with, and the fact that Dubnyk hasn't heated up yet, and it looks like he could possibly be heating up. I think they can make up that in leaps and bounds. So, that remains to be seen. But they also, I don't feel like they haven't played a ton of divisional games yet either. And so those are huge. They played the Jets twice.
Lost twice.
Yeah, they haven't played the Blues yet.
Nope.
They played the Hawks twice, split. They haven't played the Avs yet.
Nope.
They haven't played Nashville yet.
Thursday. They
play them on Thursday. So there's still a lot of games to go, and there's still a lot of divisional games to go. So I don't know. I think they're, certainly not in an ideal spot, as you wrote about on Wednesday, but I think they're in a spot where if they were going to get it done, they'd have to start working on that now.
When you mentioned Nashville, the Wild play them on Thursday. As I pointed out in my This Week in Hockey on Zone coverage on Sunday, Nashville enters the week as one of the hottest teams in the NHL, winners of 4 straight. And they got incredibly better last Sunday when they acquired Kyle Turris from Ottawa in the Matt Duchene trade.
Yep.
And, they're still without Ryan Ellis, but Nashville is starting to string together good hockey games, and they're looking like that team we saw last spring that went to the Stanley Cup final. And as you obviously pointed out, divisional game, and the Wild have not done well in divisional games early on this year, and you have to win these games, especially within your own division, because it is a total crapshoot, and it is going to come down to who does better in the division to who probably gets in the playoffs.
Yeah, and with the Blackhawks flailing, as you mentioned, hopefully their struggles can continue, and the Wild need to take advantage of that. I mean, it's not often you get the Blackhawks as a sitting duck in the division. So
it's kind of a weird place to see them, but really I wonder what's going to happen, because Corey Crawford has played insane here in the first month and change.
Right.
And
he's been the only reason why they've been even
good.
Remotely close to 500.
And when his numbers, kind of
correct a little bit.
Yeah, like that's not good for Chicago.
No.
Which, hey, great. I am going to be the first to say I'm glad to see that happen, but I don't know. The pessimist in me still goes, yep, the Blackhawks are going to get in somehow. They always do. So it's kind of you got to see it to believe it kind of a thing. It's like getting swept out of the playoffs.
Right, yeah. Yeah, nobody would have thought that Nashville was going to sweep them last spring either, so it could very much be like Boudreau's final Capitals team.
And then closing out the week on Saturday night, the Wild make their only trip to Washington.
You sound upset about that, Giles.
Yeah, the Capitals. I have not watched a single Capitals game this year.
Well, luckily for you, you won't even be in town to watch that one anyway, so
yeah.
You don't need to struggle through that one.
I'll be in a better place. Supposedly.
Yeah. We'll see about that.
No, Ovechkin off to a good start. He's got, 13 goals or something on the year. And obviously, he'll probably come back down to earth a little bit. But as I also noted in my This Week in Hockey piece on Zone Coverage, Alex Ovechkin has 14 goals in 12 games. 20 points in 12 games against the Minnesota Wild. He absolutely scorches them, and he will probably do so again because the Capitals have won, I believe it is, 4 in a row against the Wild. They've swept the last 2 years.
Sounds about right.
And usually the cause of that is the Wild not paying attention to Alex Ovechkin, which
especially on the power play
is mind-boggling considering their head coach is Bruce Boudreau.
Right. I know I've beat this drum before, but put a man on him. I understand, especially in the power play. I understand penalty kills work best as a zone. You can't possibly run a man penalty kill and be successful. I totally understand that. But the penalty kills that I have seen successful gets Alexander Ovechkin. Put a man on him. You put a man on him, and you run a 4-on-3 on the rest of the ice. And, yeah, that's a lot of space out there for the power play to work with. I understand that, why people would be against that. But it's Alexander Ovechkin, And you're you're putting a man on him, like Velcro on him. You're kind of cutting off one half of the ice. So that space that you would ordinarily have on a 4-on-3 isn't even there. So you're limited to a 4-on-3 space on the other side of the ice, Alexander Ovechkin and one of your forwards on the other side of the ice. Right. I'm certainly not an NHL head coach, but I've seen, like I mentioned before, I saw the Blackhawks do it. And, Jonathan Toews standing next to Alexander Ovechkin, and it's awfully hard for him to score like that. And I just don't understand in professional leagues that can be so copycat how that hasn't been copycatted. Like, Ovechkin is known, his trademark is one thing. It's the one-timer from the left circle on the power play. And teams still can't figure it out. It blows my mind.
Yeah, so that's what you can look forward to this week. Obviously a tough week ahead, but, if you're the Wild, you gotta start stringing wins together and no matter who you play, you got to string them together, and hopefully the good teams here in the schedule will kind of further put the boot up the rear of the Wild to get them going, as they've had a pretty lackluster first month of the season. Oh, we'll see what happens. I'd like to say should be exciting, but you never know what you're going to get with this team. It's kind of a mixed bag, so
could be exciting, could be horrible. Who knows?
I'm sure the games I'll get to see this week will be less than stellar, and then the one that I miss on Saturday will be incredible.
When are you leaving?
Friday morning.
Oh, nice. Okay.
For those unfamiliar, I'm going to Southern California next weekend.
Woo!
I'm hitting a Kings and a Ducks game.
Woo!
And for our most loyal listeners, you will know why I am hitting that Ducks game on Sunday.
Yes, sir.
I may or may not be wearing that particular jersey at this point in time.
He is. We can Facebook Live it later, but I'm using my phone right now, so not so much.
So we'll have to have a special phone-in
Yes.
podcast next week.
Yes. We'll figure that out.
We'll be all right. All right, on to the Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before.
If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because that, they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
Your Bruce Boudreau quote of the week is from a story on theathletic.com on Tuesday by Michael Russo. Bruce Boudreau was asked how his mom was doing, because the Wild were in Toronto on the off day on Tuesday, and that's where his mom lives, or she lives kind of in a suburb
she was
of
in
Toronto.
Ontario somewhere, yeah.
So he obviously went to see her, and Boudreau said before cracking the joke, "She's fine. I wish she just wouldn't watch TV." Obviously referencing watching the Wild play, because as we read in that article, she is not one to hold back on what she thinks of his decisions, particularly a challenge.
The offsides review in Calgary.
Yeah,
it was on
that
Hockey
was
Night in Canada, so she saw it.
That's why. So yeah, that is boy. As I replied to Mr. Russo on that quote, I said, boy, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that room when they discuss whatever it is. 'Cause I'm sure there would have been no shortage of laughter from that discussion. But
Yeah, from what it sounds like, clearly he is his mother's son. And there was actually a quote about her a couple of years ago when, I think after he took the Wild job, where she said something to the effect of, well, yeah, I'm going to cheer for your team, except for when you play the Leafs. And he's like, Mom, I don't coach the Leafs. She goes, I don't care. That's my team. So, kind of good on her a little bit, just to kind of, stick it to her son a little bit and kind of put him in his place, which maybe we all need every once in a while, especially if you're an NHL head coach.
she might be the only person who has the stones to put him in his place.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's good for her.
So that is your Bruce Boudreau quote of the week. On to our weekly wager.
That's your bet, sir.
Ah, yes, the bet. Okay, what the hell? It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
So for those who didn't get there last week, our weekly wager was on the Vikings game Sunday against Washington.
Yes.
And the wager was a over-under of 0.5 touchdowns for Teddy Bridgewater. And the Vikings won, obviously, but Case Keenum played so well that the services of Mr. Bridgewater were not needed. So his touchdown total on Sunday sat at 0, thus Ben winning the bet.
Woo!
And thus my Twitter avatar being changed for the next week. And it falls still under the Vikings theme. but neither Ben nor myself would really care to have that avatar.
No, not at all.
So yeah, there you go.
Please visit Giles' Twitter page and enjoy said avatar.
That was last week, and I believe that evened up the wagers on the
I
season.
think it did, 3-3.
Because that happened while I was driving, so I didn't get to update the running tally on our podcast account. But yeah, I believe it is 3-3 with the at-large bet for the season still out there. But Ben, what kind of a wager do we have in store this week?
Well, we hadn't thought about this, but as you mentioned, the Wild will go visit one Al Ovechkin on Saturday. Do you think that he scores against the Wild yet again?
Yes.
Okay. I will say he doesn't.
All right.
I will say he doesn't.
That's very bold of you. All right, what are we wagering on this?
I think we'll have to work something out. I think maybe we'll do the written statement again. That was, well, you can change it up since I've already done one, but I have one that I had prepared for you that you didn't get to read. So we'll go with the written statement on the podcast next week because you're calling in, so it's not like we can do a bar bet.
Right.
So we'll stick with that. We'll go with the written statement of our choosing to be read on the podcast next week.
And there you go. So Alex Ovechkin scores. Giles wins. Alex Ovechkin doesn't score. Ben wins.
Woo!
And the loser has to read a written statement by the winner. That is our weekly wager for this week. And away we go on to our most famed segment, to the jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
The jersey team of the week, for those not familiar with our segment, every week we look at a team that usually the Wild are playing that week, and we are now trying to imagine what a potential third jersey would look like for them next year, because obviously this year the Adidas Switch only had a home and a road jersey, so no
Wiped them
alternates.
smooth out.
So trying to imagine what the Philadelphia Flyers third jersey would look like next year. I, dear God, hope that it would be better than what we saw from them last year where they went dumpster diving in Pittsburgh.
And stole the gold trim, the Vegas gold, right off those Pittsburgh jerseys.
God, it was
In their
so
defense, it's a
bad.
short drive. I think they might go without a third jersey for a little while. They're not a big third jersey team. They only did it when they went to black a couple years ago, and then otherwise they've just kind of had some special jerseys, some throwback-ish type jerseys. I think they go back to black at some point.
Back in black?
They go back in black, yeah. It's already, you've already got the soundtrack. There you go. But I kind of like that. They used it actually as a primary for a couple years, which was a mistake, but yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing them wearing black just as an alternate. Obviously you and I very much have a soft spot for the late 90s era and the Lindros, the LeClairs, the Ron Hextall and that kind of era. I wouldn't mind seeing that make a comeback. I wouldn't mind that at all.
As long as they just bring back the Cooperalls with their third jersey.
I don't think we'll ever see Cooperalls again, which is a shame. They should
No, we won't.
I feel like and I mentioned this in my mailbag article on Zone Coverage when they talked about my mom actually asked about Fox Tracks, and I think it should be brought back one time. Let's just
Like
do
the
it.
All-Star game.
Yeah, do it one time.
Just make it a complete joke like it is because they're not going to the Olympics this year.
But is Cooperall's same thing? Let's bring it back for one game. You know what I mean? It was just the Whalers and the Flyers, right? It was just those two teams that wore them, actually as uniforms.
I believe so.
So, I don't know, make the Hurricanes wear them? I don't know. Make the Hurricanes and Flyers wear them for a game next year. Yeah, just one game, just for fun. Just for S's and G's, you know?
Well, I was going to say that bring back the black. You obviously...
Sure.
You obviously stole that.
Good at stealing.
But I don't... I actually wasn't that disappointed with that third jersey they were wearing a few years ago, that alternate orange one.
Sure.
That had the black trim, and I guess I would just like to see that one come back, but... it's the Flyers. It's an orange look, and there's really only so much you can do with orange. And obviously, they have a pretty classic look already. So
right,
no rush to add something else to it. But
right.
We'll see what happens. Maybe their third jersey could be one that it comes in black and it's got a little more Adidas to it, like some 3 stripes or something. Sky's the limit, because, like you said, the Flyers haven't had, really much of a third jersey history, but,
no.
They did almost play with some teal jerseys back in the 90s, if you can believe that.
If you haven't seen this before, look those up, and it is just the peak of 90s let's throw teal in it, and oh my God, are they bad. But yeah, that's worse than I remember.
It is.
It's so bad.
That's the most 90s thing. Like, if that had seen the light of day, that takes the Wild Wing jersey, the Burger King jersey, the Blues almost horn jersey. Like,
yeah. That's on the same level.
Out of any of it.
Yeah, please look up the Flyers teal. And it looks like, do you remember the turn forward the clock jerseys at MLB?
Yes.
It looks that bad with like ginormous logos, like they thought that was going to be futuristic.
Ken Griffey actually made it look good.
Well,
I could be biased.
Of course he did. He made everything look good.
I just, yeah. And, no, that's it's obviously a fun one to reference from the 90s, as we are very 90s centric here on this podcast.
We are. So, did you see, I tweeted this at you, there is some jersey news regarding the Washington Capitals for the Stadium Series.
When did you do this?
Geez. Might have been yesterday.
Was it when I was at the Iowa game?
No, because that was out last night too. But anyway, they tweeted out promotional, whatever, posters, placards for the Winter Classic. And the Leafs are playing the Capitals, and the Leafs are using their logo. They have the logos of both teams, is the story. And the Capitals logo is just caps with stars over it.
Shut up.
No, I tweeted at you, or look up Chris Creamer. I know Creamer was the one that tweeted it, and so I tweeted it at you. And so they'll be wearing jerseys that just say Caps. Like, it's the same font and everything, but they're just completely lopping off the iddles from Capitals.
The iddles. Oh, my
they're
God.
They're lopping off the iddles.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
No.
So instead of going retro like we would all love and adore, they're going abbreviated modern, which might look worse than their regular modern. Yeah. So that was in Jersey news this week. That's I don't want to say that's exciting, but
speaking of Winter Classics, did you see that next year?
Oh God!
The Boston Bruins and the Chicago Blackhawks will play in the Winter Classic at Notre Dame Stadium.
Yeah, I'm really glad they found a way to shoehorn an original 6 team into the Winter Classic again.
Hey, we haven't seen a Chicago-Boston matchup in the Winter Classic yet.
Yeah, well, I check that one off the list, I guess, huh? At what point, do they? It's like a bit now. You know what I mean? Like it's a bad joke. And Chicago's a big market. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll listen to that all day. And are they a good team? Well, up until this season, I guess. Yeah, they were. But at what point do you just realize that you need to have some fresh faces on those games, or nobody's going to care? You keep throwing the Blackhawks in every other season, and people are just going to lose interest in what's supposed to be your marquee game of the season.
You know, when this first started, having the Blackhawks and Bruins in the games were good because those were exciting hockey teams to watch.
Yeah.
Like, the Bruins are, they're way past their peak. They're on their way down. And, really, the Blackhawks look like, a shell of what they used to be.
Yeah,
like, even if they get back into the playoffs, they're going to sneak in as a wild card team this year. Like, they're not must-see TV anymore. Everybody wants to watch at least, the super hockey fan. They want to see, the stars of this league. That's not just John Taves and Patrick Kane. They want to see Connor McDavid. They want to see Austin Matthews. Yeah, it sucks that they are in Canadian markets, but you need to showcase the future of this league because you never know who's going to turn in. Like, the diehard hockey fan could tell a friend, like, hey, you should check out this game because it has some of the best young players in the game, and it's exciting to watch. Like, if you put Toronto in against, I'm not going to say Edmonton because they're not going to put a Canadian matchup in there.
Well,
Toronto anything is so exciting because Toronto is so run and gun.
And to your point, I get it that they don't do Canadian teams because of American markets, whatever. And they have the Heritage Classic, which is Canada's thing. Okay. But why not? I mean, you have people literally salivating over the McDavids, Matthews. I mean, they're like Crosby and Ovechkin, except they're in Canadian markets. And I think the NHL, being as short-sighted as they are so much more worried about the American markets being that important to them that they're just going to totally overlook that they have two phenomenal stars in their league that they're not going to market just because they play in Canada. And it's absolutely idiotic. Or like you said, okay, fine. Have McDavid come to visit Jack Eichel. Do that. Buffalo's already a massive hockey market for the U.S. They lead, the non-Sabre games and outstate viewers. Yeah, I mean, they're up there with Minnesota as far as the ratings go and just general hockey games. Have Eichel play McDavid. They were 1 and 2 in the same draft. You could pump that story until it dies. But they just can't get out of their own way with, we got to have major markets. Major markets, major markets, major markets. And you're more worried about major markets than you are your actual rising stars that are under 25 in your league.
So I'll kind of put you on the spot here, but who is the most exciting team in the United States to watch? Because obviously we've got Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary up there in Canada with their rosters, but what team in the United States, of all of them, just really gets you going?
I think right now it would have to be Tampa. And that one's, came to me pretty easily. You still have Pittsburgh. It's fun to watch. Washington, still fun to watch. But, yeah, I mean...
That's debatable.
But, yeah, I think, if you do a Winter Classic, and I get it's an American thing. Okay, whatever. You send Tampa, if you want a U.S. market that badly, you send Tampa up to Toronto for a Winter Classic. Why not? I mean, why not? Use your stars.
There's the other storyline there, like Steven Stamkos, Toronto native. Man, he would love to get a chance in the play in the Winter Classic. You ask the Blackhawks, any of the Blackhawks,
probably tired of it.
None of them give a rat's ass about playing in the Winter Classic. It's so worn down. Mark Lazarus, the poor beat writer of the Blackhawks, is completely tired of covering the Winter Classic. This is the exact opposite of what this was supposed to be.
Yeah.
The Winter Classic was supposed to be the greatest showcase of the game with the greatest teams, and the recycle of the same teams in this has completely watered it down. And good teams out there, as you said, Tampa, they're not going to get it. The Canadian teams that are on the rise, they're not going to get in it unless you're Montreal and you're playing Boston, because the NHL is too scared to get away from the big markets that attract the big ratings. If the NHL is going to die, then go down promoting your best players and product. Don't go down trying to beat an old horse.
Yeah.
Go down putting your very best out there and say, you know what, if we fail, we fail, but we did our best.
Well, this is how, and not to say the NHL is, on the verge of bankruptcy, at least at the moment, but this is how companies fail. this is how, this is not adapting. This is not giving the people what they want. And today's sports fan, thanks to fantasy sports, the internet, any range of things, is so much more in tune with what's exciting across the league than ever before. There's a lot of, we're seeing this. It was kind of the model of zone coverage, and it's the model of The Athletic, where there's fans from teams that aren't necessarily in those markets.
Right.
Are there a lot of Wild fans in Minnesota? Absolutely. But there's Wild fans everywhere. There's Wild fans, we've talked to in Denver. There's Wild fans in Austria. There's, there's Wild fans all over the globe, and that's kind of what we're shooting for.
Right.
And that's what the NHL should shoot for. Yeah, there's a lot of Blackhawk fans in Chicago, and nationwide I'm sure they'd like to see them, but there's a lot of people that want to watch Austin Matthews play too.
Right.
And the fact that they didn't have a nationally televised game this year, the 2 times that Matthews and McDavid meet, is just like microcosm number one that kicks you straight in the balls, that tells you that the NHL has no freaking idea what they're doing. None whatsoever. And it's horribly sad. It's horribly sad. Imagine, I think I saw a tweet from, imagine having a game this good that's promoted this poorly. And it really blows my mind every day.
And that's what stinks for me because, me, diehard hockey guy, love to watch as much hockey as I can. I have NHL TV, so if the game that I want to see isn't a nationally televised game, yeah, I'm going to put it on NHL TV. What also is terrible right now is, NHL TV also continues to be a trash product.
Tire fire, yeah.
Just because of how they're putting out videos, and it's just it's so hard to stream, and it's what are you doing with this? And I don't know. We could sit here and record an entire podcast about what's wrong with the NHL, but
we've threatened it a number of times. But no, I think this is where, it's just, you really hate getting constant reminders of how incompetent they are, and you get one, it feels like weekly at this point. It just, I don't know. It's really, or start doing something different with the Winter Classic too.
Get the hell off my lawn. Sorry, somebody tried to connect to my computer via the internet.
Oh, jeez. But, it's just, do something different. We're tired of seeing original 6 teams play each other in baseball stadiums. Okay, we've had enough of that. You're competing with bowl games on January 1st, and you just keep on pumping out the same crap. College football put in a playoff, and you're going to try to compete with that with the Blackhawks playing for the 97th time outdoors. Honest to God, what the hell are you thinking?
Tomorrow we're going to get a message from Tom. This was one of your finer rants.
It's hard not to rant when you're an NHL fan that sees the forest for the trees, and the freaking league doesn't.
We're also in peak retro NHL gear. We've got the Nordiques hat, and I've got the Mighty Ducks jersey.
Yes, we're 90'sing it up in here.
Yeah. No. So, all right. That was it for the Jersey segment. We really hit a tangent out of the Jersey segment, but that was the Jersey segment.
Not to.
Since we have a few minutes here still, a final thought.
I mentioned earlier, and when people, and here I'll just say ahead of time, this is a goalie apologist rant. People just absolutely shredding Devin Dubnyk after Monday night's game. And then Wednesday night's game didn't go a lot better, and there was fluky goals, and people pointed to those fluky goals like they were some kind of reflection on him, when I thought otherwise he played a pretty solid game. Sometimes things just are what they are, and Dubnyk is inconsistent. Yeah, you're going to get some stinkers out of him, but you're going to get him standing on his head sometimes too. And I just, my article on Friday I wrote pointing out how inconsistent he was, and kind of my thought process was, it really bewilders me a little bit that people still don't understand that that's who he is. That you're going to get, Nicholas Backstrom is gone. Stop expecting your goalies to be Nicholas Backstrom. Nicholas Backstrom would let in 2 goals every game. That's it. No more, no less.
No matter the shot.
He was absurdly consistent. But at the same time, he also didn't single-handedly win a lot of hockey games. He wasn't that kind of goalie. Well, Backstrom is that kind of goalie. He can lose you some hockey games. He's got some Darcy Kemper to him. But he can also win you a lot of hockey games, and we've seen him do that, and I still don't understand why a lot of Wild fans, I don't want to say doubt him, but I guess for lack of a better term, doubt him. Think that when he's not playing well, that it's just going to continue for eternity, and that he's never going to right the ship, and, you know, calling him a below-average goalie, and it's like the guy is what he is. He's, you know, going to have good years and going to have bad years and going to have good months and going to have bad months, going to have good games, going to have bad games. But just wait for the bounce back. I don't understand why that's so hard of a concept to grasp.
Well, if they had read zone coverage at the beginning of the year, they would have read that the Wild are getting incredible value still out of the Devin Gibney contract, despite their misgivings about him.
Sure. Whatever.
My final thought is... Actually, I have a couple of final thoughts. First of which is I got to cover Iowa Wild game Saturday night. Timing, unfortunately, didn't work out. I would have loved to have stuck around for the game Sunday, but it was just too late, and the drive back up is just too late. But, it was enjoyable. Obviously, Iowa winning 6-1 helps, but you know, obviously, it just kind of from what I saw and from what I've been reading here in the last, you know, week and change since they've really gotten their roster back. Since the Wild Minnesota's gone back to good health. You know, they're a pretty decent team, and so I would encourage you to give them a look. Wells Fargo Arena was surprisingly was pretty nice.
Yeah,
I love the press box location. It's kind of the equivalent of like club level at XL Energy Center.
Oh, wow!
Like it's not like way up above everything.
It's not Target Center,
right? Yep. And I only had to take one elevator up to find it. I did have to walk halfway around, but I only had to take one elevator up to find it.
Yeah.
And no, it was nice to chat with a couple players and the head coach for a little bit and kind of hear how they think things are going. And you can find some fun stories from that excursion on Zone Coverage upcoming this week. Not sure when, but I'll get them out there and hopefully make that a monthly occurrence where I make the trek down there and find something to write about. It's nice when you can get quotes from players.
So you've covered every level of hockey now except
professional.
Well, no, the AHL is professional, but
okay.
The NHL. So you've covered high school, college, and now minors.
You know, I just thought after the game when I was done, it was just like I just had that quote from Star Wars: A New Hope, where Obi-Wan goes,
"You've taken your first step into a larger world."
Maybe not to get too ahead of myself. But no, it was fun, and I mean, obviously the players were great, but they had also just won 6-1, so
opportune game for you to go.
Yeah, so it was nice. And then my other final thought: Hockey Hall of Fame inductions are on Monday, and obviously a player very near and dear to my heart, Paul Kariya, getting inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame. A very long overdue honor. As I kind of heard, there were some out there, bigger national hockey writers, kind of grumbling about, you know, maybe not having him in the Hall of Fame, but I strongly disagree and will write you a very strongly worded letter. So yeah, I would encourage you to check out the Hockey Hall of Fame inductions on Monday if you listen to the show before Monday night. Obviously, Teemu Selanne, Dave Andrechuk, Mark Recchi, among others, are going in. But no, that can probably wrap it up for us. Again, check out our show. We are now on a bunch of places. YouTube was the biggest one we got uploaded to here in the last week. SoundCloud, Spreaker are the other newer ones. And then you can find our regular places, Stitcher, Libsyn, Google Play, and then, of course, iTunes. Please give us an iTunes rating. We are an otherwise fine podcast.
Or I won't take your questions ever again.
So you can find Ben and I on the Twitters at Giles Farrell, at Ben Remington. Our podcast Twitter account is at GATG Wild Podcast. You can also find our show on Facebook and Instagram, also at GATG Wild Podcast. And you can find Ben and I writing at zonecoverage.com/wild, or you can just go to zonecoverage.com and get your full fix of Minnesota sports. Highly encourage you to do that. A lot of good stuff coming out from all of our collected writers. And that will do it for us. Ben and I will be back next week, one of us in a much more climate-friendly place, one of us not. Me.
One of us in a much better audio recording place than we are right now.
Well, don't worry. I'll bring my headphones. They sound good.
Good.
So yeah, no, that will that'll wrap it up for us this week, and we will talk to you again next week.
Later.
St. Paul, Minnesota. Minneapolis, Minnesota.
We are ducks, and ducks fly together.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.